Happy Monday to you. I hope your weekend was stellar. For the third Sunday in a row, the Toronto Blue Jays scored double digits. So I do think your Sunday was glorious. Now, today in the Locked On Blue Jay podcast, we're going to start out by taking a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly from what we saw this past weekend from the Toronto Blue Jays. And then we're going to deep dive what the remaining schedule looks like for the Jays and how does that compare with the schedules for the teams directly in front of them and directly behind them.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ballard, Locked On Blue Jays. Yes, indeed, been locked on Toronto Blue Jay baseball ever since I can remember. Have a definite passion for Toronto Blue Jay baseball. I think you do as well. I think that's why you've tuned in today. So thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with me talking Toronto Blue Jay baseball. Locked On Blue Jay podcast, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A reminder that all Toronto Blue Jay action this season available for you to take in on SiriusXM. If you're taking in today's episode on the Locked On Blue Jay podcast YouTube page, hello and thank you for that. And to the everydayers making the Locked On Blue Jay podcast your first podcast listen every day, hello and thank you as well. Friday night was as ugly as it gets, but the Toronto Blue Jays bounced back with wins on Saturday and Sunday in Cincinnati. Just a gorgeous looking ballpark. Now with the balanced schedule, Blue Jays will be there a lot more often, so that's pretty cool. We saw great fans support this weekend for the Blue Jays. I think that's only going to get more and more as we go forward because that Cincinnati ballpark looks gorgeous, and the Blue Jays are going to be there every couple of years from now going forward. So that's all pretty exciting, I think. Now, let's do like we do around here in the Locked On Blue Jay podcast on Mondays. Let's talk about what we just saw from the weekend. We haven't been together. We haven't spoken for a couple of days, right? So let's jump into some good, some bad, and some ugly from what we saw from the Toronto Blue Jays this past weekend. And, of course, we'll start with the good. Bo Bichette. Really, would it have mattered what his production was at the plate? This is probably going in the good category no matter what, right? If you take your mind's eye back, last day of July, that injury looked UGLY. It had no alibi. That injury to Bo's knee looked ugly. The only possible cause for optimism was that it was gingerly, but he did walk off on his own power. But everything about that knee injury back on July 31st looked really bad. It really, in that moment, looked season ending. Anyway, we know it looked really bad in that moment, right? So just to have Bo back is already enough for the good category, but he even performed, had 3 hits. Now, the funny thing is he went 3 for 10, so that's a 300 batting average. You would think that's good, and for a lot of batters, that's great. For Bo, he lost a point on his batting average, though, because he's been so good overall, right? Because he's been so good overall. But wow, we saw him hit in his rehab assignment in AAA, and he comes up to the big league level. And this weekend he hit again as well. Blue Jays, I mean, certainly on Sunday, obviously a good game, but the Blue Jays won both games that he came back. Offense was pretty good both games he came back again, especially the Sunday game, yes, but just really the fact that the Blue Jays winning both games when Bo came back, he looks just completely ready to go. Bo Bichette right now, to me, looks like he's ready to be a leader of this franchise down the stretch. I'm excited about that. Definitely in the good category. Brandon Belt, definitely in the good category. 3 for 8 with a walk. So in the 9 at-bats, he's on base 4 times. So Brandon Belt doing what Brandon Belt does. Another opposite field home run for him. He's had a few in the last couple of weeks. He had 2 all total on Sunday. Brandon Belt definitely in the good category there. Although I will say, he and Dalton Varsho go back and forth for the worst Blue Jays hitter with runners in scoring position. So I will say that I definitely don't like Belt in that 3 spot. He's hitting 200 in that 3 spot. I love Brandon Belt in that 2 spot. What do you want from a 2 hitter? Somebody who can use off fields, hit behind the runner if the runner happens to get on. That's Brandon Belt. And if the runner doesn't, even if the first batter does get on, you want somebody that's going to take a lot of pitches. Give Whit Merrifield that opportunity to steal second if he gets on as the first batter. And even if he doesn't, even if Whit doesn't get on as the first batter, Brandon Belt is an on-base machine. I want him in that 2 spot. But still, great weekend for Brandon Belt. George Springer just played 1 game this weekend, but 2 for 4 in that game, and really similar to Bo in that just good to see him back healthy, right? We know the 0 for 35. We know overall George Springer has not been acceptable in 2023, but the last couple weeks, he was really turning it on. So good to see him back in the lineup. Speaking of really turning it on, wow, Danny Jansen, when he's in, he hits. I mean, is it as simple as that to say? When he's in, he hits. Loving Danny Jansen today back in the lineup for the first time in, 5 or 6 days, and no exception. He's back out there hitting. Davis Schneider. I've got Davis Schneider in the good category. Just played the one game, just had the one hit. But what a hit. But what a hit. On Saturday, Blue Jays up 3-0. Reds rally to tie. The place is going nuts because they rally on practically an inside the park home run. I know, not really, right? Because it was a huge throwing error by Biggio in right field. But either way, Ellie De La Cruz with that triple and then the error to score the one run, and then he himself scoring to tie that game at 3. Well, what was it? The top of the next inning. I think there was one out. Right, it wasn't the very next batter, but the very next time that Davis Schneider came up, right after Cincy had taken all that momentum back, Schneider hits the home run to give the Blue Jays the 4-3 lead. They would go on to that 4-3 victory. So Davis Schneider, love to see that production from you. Love to see that contribution from you on Saturday. This is the second week in a row. For the second week in a row. And not only is this person in the good category, but this person's the captain of the good category this weekend. As great as it was to see Bo come back, Dalton Varsho. Wow. Have a weekend for the second weekend in a row when we're looking at these good, bad, and uglies. Dalton Varsho, my goodness. 4 for 9 with 3 walks. That's a 583 on base for the weekend for Dalton Varsho. Have we seen him picking it up lately? My goodness. Again, second good, bad, and an ugly in a row where Dalton Varsho is firmly in the good category. What could be more important to the Toronto Blue Jays than Springer and Vlad picking up their offense down the stretch and hitting to their potential? Well, probably not a whole lot, but Dalton Varsho's emergence to hit to his potential could be up there as massively important for the Toronto Blue Jays as we head down this stretch. How about some pitching goodness? Jose Barrios, again good. 5 2/3 innings pitched, no runs on 1 hit, 8 strikeouts, 4 walks. So we're going to have to acknowledge that. I mean, that's not in the good category. 4 walks, but everything else was really, really good from Jose Barrios. How about Hyun-Jin Ryu? My goodness, everydayers know. I did not expect any contribution in 2023 from Hyun-Jin Ryu. I wondered if he was done as a Toronto Blue Jay, in fact. He is now up to 17 1/3 innings pitched in a row without allowing an earned run. It's the second start in a row that he allowed 2 runs, but remember last time it was the Brandon Belt error. This time it was the Matt Chapman error. 17 1/3 straight innings in a row for Hyun-Jin Ryu without allowing an earned run. I mean, is that good? Holy cow. Wow. Genesis Cabrera, still no earned runs as a Toronto Blue Jay. He's remaining in the good category. I thought Jimmy Garcia was good this weekend when we saw him. And then Jordan Hicks and Jordan Romano, they're each odd this weekend. They're each their own good, bad, and ugly. They both, Hicks and Romano, both had moments this weekend of good, of wow good. Romano getting that strikeout with second and third and 1 out, nursing that 1-run lead on Saturday was wow. Jordan Hicks had some wow moments this weekend. But my goodness, isn't it true that they both had some horrible moments this weekend as well? Jordan Hicks and Jordan Romano, they were their own good, bad, and ugly this weekend for the Toronto Blue Jays. And finally, closing out the good category, Bowden Francis. 3-inning save on Sunday. So not only is that for the young man, that's his first major league save. Congratulations to you, Bowden Francis. But of course, those 3 innings saves the bullpen. Now the Blue Jays are off today. Now they head into this crucial series with the Baltimore Orioles starting tomorrow with a completely fresh bullpen, and Bowden Francis definitely played a role in that. Well done. How about some bad? Well, Whit Merrifield, just 3 for 15 this weekend. His average now back below 300. Slim Daddy Vladdy, boy, oh boy, I've got him in the bad category. And he went out of Sunday's game with an injury. So this may be, maybe better served, maybe more accurate to have this in the ugly category. Just 2 for 9. Goodness, Vlad just struggling at the plate. But again, let's watch that injury to that finger. Let's see how that's going to look going forward. This might end up being an ugly weekend for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., very unfortunately for the Toronto Blue Jays. Kevin Kiermaier. Now, I certainly could have put Kiermaier in the good category because he's one of those Blue Jays that came back this weekend, but just 1 for 8 with a pair of strikeouts. Now, the 1 hit was a home run, so Kiermaier, maybe he's similar to Jordan Hicks and Jordan Romano. Maybe he's got his own good, bad, and ugly built in there as well. But ultimately, I do have Kevin Kiermaier in the bad category, 1 for 8. And then now let's get into some ugly. Oh, boy, let's get into some ugly. We're going to start with Matt Chapman. Oh, my goodness. What do we even say about Matt Chapman? He's hitting barely over 200 since April. Barely over 200 since April. This weekend, Matt Chapman was 0 for 12 with 5 strikeouts. Pardon me? 0 for 12 with 5 strikeouts. We even saw him demoted all the way down to number 7 in the batting order. Really, really, really ugly. And the defense, he picked up more errors this weekend. He leads the league. He leads the team. He leads the Blue Jays in errors. He had even more blunders this weekend, error-wise. Oh boy, Matt Chapman, my gosh, firmly in the ugly category. Also firmly in the ugly category. My goodness. Again, by the way, Alejandro Kirk, 1 for 8 this weekend. Since the first half of last season, of course, this is an all-star. What did he hit? It was a 311, I believe it was the first half of the last season. He was just such a good hitter last season at the beginning. Second half of last season, first half of this season, plus August now. So since last year's all-star break, Alejandro Kirk is hitting 246 with 9 home runs. That's well over a full season equivalent. 9 home runs, pardon me, 246? Wow. Alejandro Kirk in the ugly category. Now, for the first time in a while, we've got Kevin Biggio in the ugly category. I know Kevin Biggio lately, wow, he's been planting himself in the good category. It's been a really nice, pleasant surprise for a lot of us recently how well Kevin Biggio has been doing. Not this weekend. This weekend, 1 for 9 with 5 strikeouts. Oof. Kevin Biggio was ugly this weekend. And Santiago Espinal, I mean, he's been living in the ugly category. 1 for 7 this weekend for Santiago Espinal. So between Biggio and Espinal, a 2 for 16 weekend. That's in the ugly category. More coming right up on the Locked On Blue Jay podcast. And a reminder that all Toronto Blue Jay action this season available on SiriusXM. Now, I wanted to mention about ticket sales and buying tickets and where should you go? I get asked a lot, Craig, do you have any ideas for, where I should get last minute ticket ideas? Well, in the past, I never had a good answer for this. I certainly do now. The Game Time app, an app I've used numerous times and will again. I'm looking at that Washington game in a couple Mondays from now. I'm looking at using the app again for Blue Jay tickets. And the whole point of it, I mean, buying tickets to your favorite events, it shouldn't be stressful. So Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater, you name it, near you. Killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you're going to have. My own personal experience, everydayers know, I've used the Game Time app a few times. That's how I got the Jansen and Romano bobblehead. I love that bobblehead. Got the tickets through Game Time. I've used Game Time, I want to say about 6 or 7 times this season. Again, will continue to use it. And for me, why I keep coming back, what works, it's so easy to use. That's important for me. I'm no good at this technical stuff. So it's you get the seat view. So I love that. Then it's 2 clicks and the tickets are sent right to your phone. It is that easy. For somebody like me, I can barely spell technology, let alone be advanced with technology. I need it to be easy to use. Game Time, very easy to use. And I really covet as well. I really respect the Game Time guarantee. So the Game Time guarantee means you're always going to get the best price, because if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's going to get you $20 off your first purchase. The terms apply. Now, again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, everydayers, you'll remember, of course, there's a few times this season where we really deep dive the schedule for the Toronto Blue Jays, especially at the beginning, right? When we looked at the whole thing as a big picture and we saw, what an absolute beast of a schedule this is for the Blue Jays this season. It's a brand new schedule altogether now with a balanced schedule. So it was unbalanced before, right? So you play your own teams in your own division 18, 19, or 20 times each season. And then you'd play the other teams at most 6, 3 at home, 3 away. Some you wouldn't play at all. Well, now it's a balanced schedule, everybody playing everybody. So less games for the Blue Jays against the American League East teams. And now they make sure they play, like the Jays didn't play Washington last season. They do this season as an example. And because of the renovations to Rogers Center, that made things, extremely difficult for the schedule makers and for the schedule for the Toronto Blue Jays. Remember, 16 of the first 22 Blue Jay games were on the road. I've never seen that before. 25 of the first 37 Toronto Blue Jay games this season were on the road. There were multiple stretches this season where the Blue Jays played 17 games in 17 straight days. Usually over the course of 17 days, you have at least two. You might even have a third day off in there. The Blue Jays had a few stretches where they did not have any of those days off. So we're now at the point where there's 37 games remaining. Blue Jays 69 and 56. That's an 89 win pace. I mean, that's stunning to me. Absolutely stunning. They're on pace for worse than last season. Oh boy, with this pitching staff and this bullpen, I'm very surprised by that. But I mean, that is where we are right now. Now let's take a look at what we're looking forward to the rest of this season, because the schedule, as tough as it has been for the 2023 Toronto Blue Jays, worth noting, it is about to open up. Not immediately. Blue Jays are off today, and then they're in Baltimore on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So it doesn't open up anytime soon, because you know what American League East teams have done to the Toronto Blue Jays this season. You know what the Baltimore Orioles have done to the Toronto Blue Jays so far this season. Now, outside of the last 3 road games of the season, that's September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th at Tampa Bay, outside of those 3 games, this is the hardest 3 games on the road remaining for the Toronto Blue Jays. So my goodness, big old series coming up for the Jays. If they can take 2 out of 3 from Baltimore, again, it may be their hardest at best. It's their second hardest road series still remaining this season. So if they can take 2 out of 3, it's going to be absolutely massive. Now, following that, the Blue Jays are home for 3 to Cleveland. So, I mean, Cleveland's offense just so bad, right? I know Cleveland's pitching really got the Jays a couple weeks back. So I'm not at all suggesting that that's an easy series at all. But if the Blue Jays really are a playoff team, really do fancy themselves World Series, in fact, contenders, have to take 2 out of 3 from that Cleveland series. But then things get wide open. To close out August, the Blue Jays are at home for 3 against the last place Washington Nationals, then a day off, and they head out west. 3 games at last place Colorado, 3 games at last place Oakland. That's a West Coast road trip. So have you. We've seen West Coast road trips derail seasons for the Toronto Blue Jays. We've seen West Coast road trips where the Blue Jays went 1-8, 1-9, 0-10. We've seen West Coast road trips derail entire seasons. This one should help set the Blue Jays up for success. This is an amazing West Coast road trip. Colorado's got the worst record in the league, and Oakland's right there with them. 2 of the absolute worst teams in baseball. That's the road trip. Then another day off. I mean, the day offs are flying right now. It's why the Blue Jays don't have to go to that 6-man rotation anymore, because as tough as the schedule has been, it's opening up, not just from an opponent standpoint, but from these days off and a well-rested standpoint, because there's another day off right there, and then 3 at home versus the last place Kansas City Royals. So that's 3 against Cleveland, I think should be doable. Then 3 against the last place Nationals, 3 against the last place Rockies, 3 against the last place A's, 3 against the last place Royals. It's a 12-game stretch, and could be 15, right? If you're not worried about Cleveland. Holy moly. Now those 3 at home against Kansas City, that kicks off a 10-game homestand. I mean, is the schedule opening up here? A 10-game homestand. You got those 3 versus Kansas City, then 4 versus Texas, and 3 versus Boston. So, okay, fine, agreed. Business picks up, right? Because we know Texas is all of a sudden neck and neck in their division with Seattle and Houston. And, of course, Boston. Remember, a couple Sundays ago, the Blue Jays beat Boston 13-1 at Boston to sweep Boston, and I truly thought that eliminated. I thought that was a knockout blow to Boston. My gosh. The Red Sox have got all the way back up. They're a couple games back now from the Toronto Blue Jays. So, yes, from an opponent standpoint, fine. That's not an easy homestand, even though the first 3 are against Kansas City. But just the fact that it is a homestand, just the fact that it's 10 games at home for this road-heavy Toronto Blue Jay team, I think it sets them up really well. The New York Yankees are currently in last place, of course, having one of their worst seasons in recent memories. Toronto Blue Jays have 6 games left still with that last place free-falling New York Yankee team. If there are all in all, I was going to say, isn't there the 4 worst records in baseball? Yes. How about that? The 4 worst records in baseball are all on the Toronto Blue Jays schedule in September. This schedule is opening up. The only last place team that the Toronto Blue Jays will not play down the stretch is the NL Central last place, whether that's going to be St. Louis or Pittsburgh, either one. That's the only division in baseball. 6 divisions in baseball. The Blue Jays down the stretch will play the last place team in 5 of those 6 divisions. And one of them, or a couple of them actually, they'll play multiple times. The Yankees, for example. Now, are you a glass half full? Because I mean, if you're a glass half full, well, hang on, I was going to get to Houston. Let's get to Houston in a second here. Let's finish up just because I want to remind us that the last 12 games of the season, the last 2 weeks, the last 12 games of the season are all against New York and Tampa Bay. So I'm thinking, if you do the math of it here now, if the Blue Jays can pick up 3 games on Tampa Bay over the next 4 or 5 weeks, and Tampa Bay right now lost McClanahan, their stud for the season, whatever the heck this is happening with Wander Franco, like this Tampa Bay team might be ripe for the plucking right now. We know Baltimore's already caught and passed them. So if the Blue Jays can pick up at least 2, probably 3 games over the next 4 or 5 weeks, then that sets up the Blue Jays where in those last 6 games of the season against Tampa Bay, if the Jays can go 4-2, they might actually pass. They might actually catch and pass the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, yes, 4-2 against the Rays, no matter what's happening with them, is a tall order. Rays always beat the Blue Jays. I know this, right? Well, don't we know that that's the case? But still, with the way the Rays are free falling right now, man, it could be on the table, especially with the schedule opening up. It could be on the table where the Blue Jays catch the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, can the Blue Jays catch the Houston Astros? I would think you have to be a real glass half full to think that that could be the case. But I mean, ironically, who do we even cheer for in these next couple of weeks? Over the next 10 days, the Astros and the Red Sox will play each other 7 times. I'm going to say that again because that's 2 teams that the Blue Jays have to be out of town scoreboard watching right now. Over the next 10 days, the Houston Astros, who are, just slightly above the Blue Jays in the standings, and the Boston Red Sox, who are just slightly below the Blue Jays in the standings, they will play each other 7 times. Wow. I mean, if one of those teams goes, 6-1, they may eliminate the other team. If one of those teams goes 5-2, they might eliminate those other teams. So hopefully the Blue Jays can get some dirty work done by one of those 2 teams against each other. Now, the Astros also, they split a 4-game series against the Yankees a few weeks back. They'll play them in Houston to open up the month of September. So again, Blue Jays are going to need some help from their fellow AL East foes if you think they can still catch Houston. And the Astros will also play, they still have 3 more games left against Baltimore. So ironically, Blue Jays need a lot of wins from AL East teams and need to take care of their own business, obviously, if they're going to have a chance to catch Houston. How about the Seattle Mariner team? What on earth is going on here? Sellers at the trade deadline, including their closer, by the way. They're on a 10-game road trip right now. They're 6-1 on this 10-game road trip, including just having swept Houston. What is going on here? What is happening here? And Seattle and Toronto really going back and forth right now for that 3rd wildcard spot. And ironically, that 3rd wildcard spot, if you can hand pick, I don't even think I would want to hand pick the number 1 wildcard spot. Yes, you would host, but the third and final wildcard spot plays at Minnesota, plays at the Central winner, which is going to be at Minnesota. Man, I had to catch myself here. I was just about to say that's an easy series. Is there even such a thing in the playoffs? I mean, I doubt it, but that winnable. There you go. That's a very winnable series. So Seattle and Toronto both jockeying right now, ironically, for that 3rd and final playoff spot. But I think it's a 3rd and final wildcard spot. But I think it's the place to be. Now, Seattle has they're ending this road trip this week with 3 at Chicago. So this 6-1 road trip finishes up with 3 at the lowly Chicago White Sox. Are you kidding? This should have been a 10-game road trip that took the Seattle Mariners out of the mix. Instead, they've used it to gain ground. We just saw the Blue Jays win 2 out of 3, by the way, on the weekend. They lost ground on Baltimore. They lost ground on Seattle, and they lost ground. There's a 3rd on Boston. Holy cow. So thank goodness this schedule is about to open up here. My gosh. Now, the Mariners overall, we talked about how the Blue Jays have some last place teams coming. Worth mentioning. In fact, I have to mention the Seattle Mariners have 15 games still remaining with the lowly New York Mets, Kansas City Royals, Chicago White Sox, and Oakland A's. Now, their top-heavy games aren't quite as bad as the Toronto Blue Jays. Jays will have to play Tampa, yes. Again, let's see what the state of Tampa is going to be going forward. And the Blue Jays will still have to play Texas, yes. But the Mariners still have to play a really good, in fact, a great Dodgers team. And the Mariners' last 10 games of the season. So, again, the last 2 weeks where the Blue Jays are playing only the Rays and the last-place Yankees. During that same time, Seattle is playing the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers. Wow. So really, if you're the Blue Jays, you're just looking to stay at worst, 1.5 back of Seattle going into those final 2 weeks because your schedule is significantly going to be easier than Seattle's schedule. Now, very important note here. The Blue Jays went 3-3 versus the Mariners this season, so that's the first tiebreaker head-to-head. The second tiebreaker is your record within the division. Seattle's already clinched that. So if Toronto and Seattle were to finish tied in the standings, it would not be a play-in game. It's a tiebreaker, and the Toronto Blue Jays would be on the outside looking in. So very important. Keep that in the back of your mind. The Blue Jays have to finish ahead of the Seattle Mariners, whereas the Mariners just need to keep pace with the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, I cannot even believe that we need to look at this, but the Boston Red Sox, what's their final schedule look like? Again, back on August 6th, 13-1 beatdown of the Blue Jays over the Boston Red Sox, completing the sweep at Boston. That put the Red Sox in last place, 5 games back of the Toronto Blue Jays. Since, Red Sox are 9-4, the Blue Jays are 6-6, and now the Red Sox are right there, tapping on the backs of the Toronto Blue Jays. Stunning. I think I said point blank that 13-1 victory on Sunday a couple weeks back, that August 6th win. I think I said point blank that knocks out the Boston Red Sox, put them back in last place, 5 games back of the Jays. I thought that we have them in our rear view now. Somehow they are killing it. And by the way, talk about the schedule. Red Sox at Blue Jays. It's a weekend series. So Red Sox in a weekend series was already going to be a sellout, was already going to be a great atmosphere. This is September 15th, 16th, and 17th. This is right in the middle of the stretch run, September, the stretch run month, right? Holy cow. Is that going to be drama that weekend? Wow. Now the Blue Jays right now, or sorry, the Red Sox right now, sorry, they're in the midst of 16 straight games. That 16 straight games over 16 straight days. So they're in a bit of a tough part of their schedule as well. They're winning though, darn. Now their next 10 games, 4 at Houston, 3 at home versus the Dodgers, then 3 at Houston. Then they've got a day off. Finally, they get a day off. Then 3 at Kansas City, 3 at Tampa Bay. So these next 3 weeks are really going to decide will the Red Sox even be in contention by the time they come to town in mid-September. But let's hope. Again, who do you cheer for the Blue Jays? That's 7 over the next 10 games. The Red Sox versus Astros. My gosh. Now 3, even though the Red Sox are at home, 3 against the Dodgers, that we should see the Dodgers do well there. And then the 3 at Tampa Bay. I know, again, Tampa Bay possibly reeling, but still Tampa Bay at home should be a problem for the Red Sox as well. So all told, down the stretch, the Boston Red Sox, 3 at home versus Kansas City, 4 at home versus the Yankees, 3 at the White Sox, and then so those are all very winnable games, right? Can't be happy there if you're a Blue Jay fan. But again, 10 versus Houston and Texas, 3 versus the Dodgers, 5 versus Tampa, 6 versus Baltimore. So as the Blue Jays schedule is opening up, yeah, if you're the Red Sox, you got to love those 3 versus Kansas City. You got to love those 4 at home versus the Yankees. Sure. This upcoming 3-game series at Chicago, what's the problem there? Sure. But 10 remaining versus Houston and Texas, 3 remaining versus the Dodgers, 5 versus the Rays, 6 versus the Orioles. Of everybody in contention, I think the Red Sox by far have the toughest schedule down the stretch. That's a wrap for Monday's Locked On Blue Jays podcast. I certainly hope you enjoyed that. Reminder, all Toronto Blue Jay action available this season on SiriusXM. Go Jays, go, and we'll talk tomorrow.